RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. 5 young people, the eldest 16 and the youngest 11, were involved in the abuse and killing of a kitten in Southland. A video that emerged yesterday showing the kitten being bashed to death with a stone has caused widespread outrage. Timothy Brown reports.
The 5 are being interviewed and referred to Invercargill's Youth Aid. Constable Chris Wakeland says 3 other kittens have been removed from the homes of one of them. He says the video has also sickened the police. Youth Aid means the offenders will likely avoid court, but face alternative action at the discretion of officers managing the case. This is Timothy Brown.
The Prime Minister says Australia is being overly sensitive about New Zealand's offer to take Manus Island refugees. In an interview on News Talk ZB yesterday, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce suggested New Zealand mind its own business regarding this issue. Jacinda Ardern's renewal of a 2013 offer to take 150 refugees from Australia's offshore detention centres has so far been turned down. Asked this afternoon if Australia is being overly sensitive, Ms Ardern replied simply yes.
As far as I'm concerned, we made the offer, it remains on the table, that's that.
Jacinda Ardern says she hasn't raised the issue for weeks and is only talking about it because Australian politicians keep bringing it up. There's been a stunning upset in a US Senate election in the state of Alabama. In a contest widely seen as a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency, the Democratic Party candidate Doug Jones has narrowly beaten the Republican Roy Moore. Mr. Moore's campaign has been dogged by allegations of sexual misconduct toward teenagers in the 1980s. The BBC is reporting the result as a political earthquake for the Trump administration, given Alabama's traditional conservatism. While Republicans maintain control of both houses of Congress, Mr. Jones's victory cuts their Senate majority to 51 to 49, possibly making it harder for Mr. Trump to advance his policy agenda. The State Services Minister says some chief executives' pay increases cannot be justified when compared to what other New Zealanders get. The State Services Commissioner has told the boards of 3 Crown entities, ACC, TELAC and the Super Fund, that they've paid their CEOs over and above what was recommended and their tenure may be at risk if they ignore future recommendations. The Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the increases need to be reined in.
New Zealanders are rightly concerned about the chief executive pay in the wider state sector. The government shares that concern, as does the State Services Commissioner, and that is definitely something that we are looking very closely at. I'm not convinced that the current regulatory and legal regime around chief executive pay is sufficient.
The State Services Minister, Chris Hipkins. The former Minister for Primary Industries says the new government's shake-up of the ministry is ludicrous and wasteful. 4 new entities, Fisheries New Zealand, Forestry New Zealand, Biosecurity New Zealand and the New Zealand Food Safety, are to be created by April. Nathan Guy says the government hasn't even defined what the problem is with MPI.
$41 billion of exports are generated from our farmers and growers, and MPI has a big role to play in that economic growth. And so in my view, they do a very good job, but this is ideologically driven. It won't achieve anything, in my view, and be extremely costly.
The National MP, Nathan Guy. The cost of upgrading 2 of the Navy's frigates has blown out again, this time by $140 million. The project, originally estimated to cost $374 million, will now cost $639 million. The Defence Minister Ron Mark said the government decided against finding a new company to complete the upgrade and has signed a revised contract with Lockheed Martin Canada.
The systems on board are already considered to be outdated and of questionable effectiveness and safety. This project was signed off to happen in 2008. It's now 2017.
Ron Mark attributes the latest blowout to inaccurate estimates, project management errors and previous ministers' failures to act. It's 5:04. Sport. The Silver Ferns are still hopeful veteran mid-quarter Laura Langman will play at the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast next year. They sorely missed her in the Constellation Cup series earlier this year when Australia whitewashed them 4-0. By playing for the Sunshine Coast in the Australian domestic competition, while not based in New Zealand, Langman was ineligible to play for the Silver Ferns under Netball New Zealand rules. However, last month she announced she was terminating her Australian contract early and taking a year out from the sport, and Southby seems to be hoping she might yet play at the Commonwealth Games.
She's made some decisions around what she wants to do in the short term over the next 2 or 3 months, and we'll connect with her post-quad series and see where things are at with her. But, door's always open. She's obviously been a real stalwart, and so you never look at that stuff and say, no, we're not going there. We'd certainly got dialogue going.
Silver Ferns coach Deneen Southby. FIFA has fined the Peru Football Association $7,000 because Peruvian fans directed laser pointers at the All Whites during last month's World Cup playoff, and $10,000 for delaying the team sheet handover before the Wellington leg. Meanwhile, New Zealand striker Chris Wood's English Premier League side, Burnley, have beaten Stoke 1-0 to climb to 4th in the Premiership. It's the highest Burnley have ever been in the top flight since March 1975. That's the news.
Cow disease spreads.
In hindsight, it was inevitable. I guess we're one big country and we can't close the barrier between the North and South Island.
How to beat man flu.
Male-friendly spaces with enormous televisions and reclining chairs where men can recover from the debilitating effects of man flu in safety and comfort.
And crocs threaten Queensland tourists.
Those things, they move quick and they can do a lot of damage. We've had 5 attacks here in the last 18 months in North Queensland with 3 fatalities.
Survival of the fittest. Morning report with Guy and Espiner and Kim Hill, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, increasing productivity in the construction sector and why quality must match quantity as the industry struggles to meet demand. And after 10, tales from the top of Arangi Mount Cook as handed down by pioneers' descendants. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Waikato mainly fine but isolated showers today and rain tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo mainly fine isolated showers in the afternoons into evenings. Waitomo to Wellington including Taihape, isolated showers turning to rain this evening, then clearing early tomorrow morning. Isolated thunderstorms possible Taranaki to Wellington. Hawke's Bay, Gisborne and Wairarapa, isolated showers turning to rain tonight with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms and hail, rain easing to showers later tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, isolated showers turning to rain this afternoon, possibly heavy with thunderstorms and hail, clearing tonight. Canterbury, rain, possibly heavy with thunderstorms and hail inland, easing to showers overnight, then clearing tomorrow. For the remainder of the South Island, scattered rain, clearing for Fiordland and Southland this afternoon and elsewhere this evening, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers from this evening. It's just gone 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and thank you everyone for being with us. What an absolutely fascinating night. We're going live to the US shortly. Alabama has gone to the Democrats, a huge turnout of African American voters. The singular Trump ability to galvanise conservative white voters falling short, and a highly controversial Republican candidate losing a highly reliable Republican seat. We are live there shortly, but we begin tonight with the Indian students deported, facing deportation or appealing deportation, covered at length on Checkpoint earlier this year. Tonight we can reveal that at least 2 of those men became parents while they were here. Their partners and children are New Zealanders. Checkpoint has looked at the case of Palwinderjeet Singh, now back in Amritsar, India. It's not in dispute that he was an overstayer, but an Immigration New Zealand officer found that the relationship he had with his partner, Nikki Harawira, was genuine and, quote, satisfied all immigration instructions. Indeed, we have Immigration New Zealand's paperwork, and it recommends accepting Mr Singh's application under the family partnership category. The application was declined. Why? Well, coming up, their lawyer, who says Immigration New Zealand have become increasingly punitive in recent years, despite applicants having New Zealand children. But first, Nikki Harawira, she works at a kohanga reo in Bay of Plenty and is raising their child Tute Manawa alone. I asked her how she met Palwinderjeet.
We actually met in the Tauranga Library, of all places, yes. We met there in 2015, around about the end of June. we met.
Which is a rather old-fashioned and quaint place to meet at the library. What happened?
Yes, I know. Actually, I was on my computer. I go to the library now and then, and I was on one of the computers downstairs and just trying to find, don't even remember what the book was at the time. I didn't know what the computer was doing. He just happened to walk past me, him and one other friend, and I just said to him, "Excuse me, bro, could you help me on the computer? Can you help me with this?" And and then he come and helped me. He didn't know what to do either. And then we just started talking from then and exchanged numbers, and and the rest is history.
This is a funny old interview, and you can say to me, "Bugger off, John, that's an intensely personal question, but I guess this stuff is material." So did you fell in love? You and Parley fell in love?
Yeah, we did.
And Immigration New Zealand say they are satisfied all immigration instructions have been met under the family partnership category, right? So they viewed you as a legitimate couple. This wasn't a kind of green card movie situation.
No. This was not trying to, marry him to keep him here or pay me out. None of that. We're totally genuine and still very much in love.
And you have a baby.
Yeah, and it's really hard. He's 15 months now. It's really hard without him here, and my son needs his father. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's really touchy subject to me. Yeah, we just want him home. He hasn't done anything illegal.
Well, the thing he did do wrong, right, and this is not in dispute, was that he overstayed, right? So he stayed longer than he was entitled to under his visa.
Yeah, he was, yes, and why also too was because he was promised from lawyers and even his boss that they will get him his visa. He was just hard done by crooked lawyers and a crooked boss he had here, and he just.
Nikki, sorry, I just want to come in there. So he believed, do you think, in good faith, he believed he was in the process of becoming a New Zealander?
Yes,
and so when you fell in love and you conceived your baby, did you think he was an overstayer who was going to be turfed out, or did you think he was in the process of becoming a New Zealander?
Yes, I knew he was overstaying, but also we believed that he was in the process of becoming a citizen. They were helping to get his visa, and it wasn't the case at all.
So can you talk me through the process whereby Immigration New Zealand made their assessment, and I have the words in front of me, that you are a couple, a legitimate couple like any other couple, setting aside Parley's overstaying. How did they determine that? What sort of tests or scrutiny did you go through?
Okay, so we had to prove, which was absolutely horrible, prove that we were in a genuine relationship. So we had to send communicate everything from joint bank accounts to statements from companies to say, stuff like that. We had to, prove our relationship was genuine, which was really hard, especially when we're truly in love. And then we had a visit from 2 immigration officers. They were very lovely, and we were under the belief, just what they had said to us, that he needed a special direction to be able to come back to New Zealand, right? And then they made us believe that he was going to get a special direction. All you'd have to do is go back to India. And then about 2 months ago, we got a letter to say that his residence application was going to be denied. Is denied, and they don't have to, and it says that there's no reason. We don't give you any reason. We don't have to give a reason why, and it just absolutely broke my heart. And it was so hard, but we just, what can we do? We're not going to give up. And
It's Nikki Harawira. Alistair McClymont is the lawyer acting for Nikki and Parwinterjit Singh. He's acted for many of the Indian students. He says what concerns him most about this case is that Immigration New Zealand's own officer assessed their relationship, found it genuine, stated it met instructions under the family partnership category and supported approval.
Well, they went to their house and they visited the family. They saw the extended whānau. They saw Pali with the baby. They were very supportive of the relationship. They said this is definitely a very genuine and stable partnership, and they have no concerns about it whatsoever.
And I have here the statement of Immigration New Zealand officer, who I won't name, who says, "I'm satisfied all immigration instructions have been met under the family partnership category. I therefore recommend the application be approved in principle."
Yes, it's fairly normal that you get the officer who makes the initial decision will recommend an approval, and then it goes to the next level up, the management level, and there seems to be a different philosophy at play once you get to that level.
And so what's going on? Is it, because no one is disputing that Pali was an overstayer, right?
Correct.
So is it that the overstaying overrides the family partnership criteria?
At the moment, the need to punish people for overstaying and to create a deterrence for people to do this again seems to override pretty much everything else, including having New Zealand citizen spouses, children with medical problems, New Zealand citizen children, the need to keep a family together. Nothing else matters except the need to punish and to deter.
Are you saying that Immigration New Zealand are being excessively punitive?
Yes, and this is a change because 10 years ago you would have never seen these sorts of things. Something has happened within the underlying philosophy of the immigration system in this country over the recent years that this has now become the only way in which they can run an immigration system is to punish, regardless of the humanitarian pain that it's causing and the pain for these young, innocent New Zealand citizen children who will have a Christmas with no father. And I would guess it would be hundreds of families waking up on Christmas morning who will be in exactly the same situation.
Hundreds?
Hundreds. I mean, I could go and look at least a dozen files that I have in my office now where I know families will be separated, New Zealand citizen children who won't have their fathers here. I've talked to other immigration lawyers and advisors who say, yeah, I've probably got a dozen as well. Once you do the maths, we'd definitely come up with hundreds.
Alistair, this is going to be a difficult question because Immigration New Zealand themselves say that Nikki and Pali were absolutely a couple, full stop.
Yep.
But is the risk, and I don't want to sound like some kind of moral majority gatekeeper here, but is the risk citizenship by conception? Does Immigration New Zealand have to have some control over the rigorous assessment of what a family is?
You know, what is the cost of this, and why does everybody have to be tarred with the same brush? I mean, yes, there are people that come and enter into marriages of convenience, and yes, there are couples that separate, but as soon as you decide that every single Indian person that comes here and has a partnership with a Māori or Pacific Island woman, that those relationships are all fake and the kids are not genuine and they must be punished for this, then you have the risk that you're going to destroy a lot of young people's lives and have a lot of children that are going to grow up without a mother and father, the sort of things that we take for granted.
Alistair McClymont, what did Immigration New Zealand say? Well, they weren't available for an interview tonight, but they provided us with a statement a short time ago from Area Manager Marcel Foley. It says Immigration New Zealand considers partnership applications very carefully and needs to be satisfied that the relationship is genuine, stable and likely to endure. Mr Singh is an excluded person as he has been prohibited from entering New Zealand for 5 years after he self-deported. The officer assessing the application acknowledged that the couple were in a genuine and stable relationship that is likely to endure, but that was outweighed by the fact that Mr Singh had been unlawful in New Zealand for over 1.5 years and had not shown any remorse for his past actions. That statement just in from Immigration New Zealand. We'd love your feedback on this. Text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radio.nz.com. We're going live to Alabama shortly, but before that, let's go to Wellington. We are going to Wellington. Public sector boards paying their CEOs over the odds have been named and shamed for the first time by their boss and given a warning about their future job prospects. The State Services Commissioner has named 3 boards that have paid over and above what was recommended by the Commission, the Guardians of New Zealand Superannuation, ACC and Auditor Talark. The government says pay increases at the top levels are unacceptable and will need to be reined in. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
I gotta tell you, I think that I have been...
That was Doug Jones, who was just announcing delightedly that he had won Alabama for the Democrats. We will have that grab in a moment when we go to our correspondent, but let's go to Jane Patterson's report about the State Services Commission and state sector CEO salaries.
At the top of the list is the Superfund CEO, Adrian Orr, whose pay went up from between $830,000 and $840,000 to between $950,000 and $960,000. The board has declined to comment, but in a statement says the pay is in line with the performance of the fund. The State Services Minister Chris Hipkins told reporters there are various options on the table.
I'm not saying that we'd necessarily do a cap, but I think the government does want to look at more levers for how we can ensure that this, very significant growth at the top end of the public sector is dealt to.
But a cap is on the table.
I'm not ruling any options out. What I've asked is that the State Services Commissioner come back to me with advice on regulatory and legal options.
Chris Hipkins says the government's concerned about the rate at which chief executive pay is increasing compared with other New Zealanders.
We think that has gotten out of hand in some places. We're also concerned that some of the Crown entities have effectively ignored the advice of the Commissioner and the advice of government in making significant salary increases that aren't justified.
We asked people in Wellington what they thought of CEO pay levels.
You walk past them every day, you see homeless people sitting on the street asking people for change. Why couldn't the government be trying to help them out to give them a little bit more money each week, or put them for a course for some work or something, instead of paying these people who are already qualified shit tons amount of money?
It does seem quite excessive, definitely compared to probably what public servants get.
I think there's definitely pay inequality, and I think it seems to be getting worse. I don't think public is paid as well as private.
When he was Prime Minister, Bill English also spoke out about CEO pay and the need to rein it in. The national leader says there could be consequences for board members who ignore recommendations.
It puts their appointment at risk, I think, if that attitude continued.
In a statement, the ACC chairperson Paula Rebstock says the State Services recommendation was a 1% increase. The board looked at the market movement of 4% and approved a 2% boost. That took the CEO's pay from between $760,000 and $770,000 to between $810,000 and $820,000. The National MP Nikki Kay used to hold the ACC portfolio.
When I was the Minister, my recollection is that I did not agree with the increase in pay. There's a process that has to go through in terms of state services, but I was very clear that I didn't support the additional pay increase.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says this situation has exposed flaws in the system.
We've looked at what powers we have in this area, and for some of the pay scales where they've really outstripped the increase that other members of the public have had, those are the ones where they haven't been answerable to anyone. We're actively seeking now what we can do to make sure they are answerable to at least, for instance, a State Sector Commissioner. Something has to change.
Officials have now been asked to look at various options, including a potential change to the Crown Entities Act. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Right, let's head now to the United States, where something extraordinary has just happened. Shocking is the word the Washington Post is using. Democrat Doug Jones has won a special election to take the Senate seat of Alabama from the Republicans for the first time in a quarter of a century. US President Donald Trump had vocally and repeatedly backed Roy Moore, a candidate who'd faced multiple allegations of sexual assault. This is a domino falling. Next in line, well, possibly Donald Trump's efforts to pass tax reform in Washington. The Republican majority in Senate is now 51-49, and all of those 51 votes cannot always be relied upon. But this is also a broader blow to Donald Trump and a reputation based upon his ability to sway conservative voters with the sheer force of his personality. Alabama is Republican. Trump backed the Republican. The Democrats won Doug Jones spoke to his ecstatic supporters just a few minutes ago.
I got to tell you, I think that I have been waiting all my life, and now I just don't know what the hell to say. I am truly overwhelmed. I am truly, truly overwhelmed. But you know, folks, and you have all heard me say this at one point or another in this campaign, I have always believed that the people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us. We have shown not just around the state of Alabama, but we have shown the country the way that we can be unified.
Doug Jones, let's go now live to our US correspondent, Kevin McAleese. Kevin, holy moly.
Yeah, it was a thrilling watch, wasn't it? I mean, a stunning turn of events in this special election race. Democrat Doug Jones, grinning like a Cheshire cat, got the cream, wins in a deep red state. We can't stress that enough. Coming from behind, first time in 25 years, a Democrat will be elected senator for Alabama. And on top of that, wow, huge blow for the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He went all in behind this controversial Republican candidate in Moore. He made those pre-recorded messages, those robocalls, as they're known. But on the day, it wasn't enough. As you said, the force of Donald Trump's popularity wasn't enough to push Moore over the line. And remember, Donald Trump won this state comfortably, some 20 points back in 2016, the presidential race then. So he has taken to Twitter. He's already congratulated Doug Jones, I'll quote him, on a hard-fought victory. The write-in votes played a very big factor, he adds, but a win is a win. So I guess a half congratulations.
Yeah. This is absolutely fascinating because if we look back on that US election, Trump won it by galvanising the white vote, right, in the swing states, in the Rust Belt states, in the states where there was a sense of disconnection from Washington. And as you say, Alabama is pretty much reliably Republican and has been for a quarter of a century. So what does this tell us? Was this a rejection of Moore as a candidate, or is this a waning of Trump's potency?
Well, the post-mortem is going to pick over exactly those questions in the coming weeks and months. But the big picture, you know, Moore was an incredibly divisive figure, clearly now we know, in Alabama, but also among Republicans. You know, you had some Republicans saying, look, if he gets into Congress, then I'm going to support him. You had others saying, well, I'm going to make it my mission to have him expelled before his feet even touch the ground here. That's because Roy Moore had been accused by multiple women of pursuing them and of inappropriate sexual misconduct with them, dating back to when he was in his 30s and they were in their teens, the youngest 14 years old. And that was clearly too much to stomach for some voters in Alabama. The big picture here then, you know, there are standards and there are limits of what voters will tolerate from their elected officials. And, you know, these accusations were simply too much, even for the overwhelming Christian right evangelical population in this deep red state who support Roy Moore's brand of politics. There's no doubt about that. They are completely behind it, but they couldn't reconcile voting for a man who was dogged by such serious allegations. Allegations, I should add, he has always vehemently denied.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us because it is an extraordinary result. And I think the figure, I'm just looking, have you seen these breakdown of votes by race? 96% of black voters, 96% of African-American voters went Democrat. Hillary Clinton will be looking at that and weeping, and a huge turnout too. This was a highly galvanised electorate and they made the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, a huge turnout we're seeing from the African American population in Alabama. No doubt that they played a big role, and that's why we saw that swing, didn't we, where Moore came out strong from the blocks, and then Jones brought it back for that dramatic finish. But there was a big push for the African American community to come out, and that's why you heard Jones thanking them, thanking the Latino community, and just reminding everyone that this campaign was about dignity, as he put it, dignity and respect. It was about the rule of law, and it was about common decency, and it was those pillars that attracted people to Doug Jones, maybe even some Republicans to Doug Jones, and of course all of those write-ins who just couldn't bear to vote for him.
Kevin McAleese joining us live. Thank you so much, Kevin. Alabama, the Senate seat that was held by the Republicans for 25 years has gone to the Democrats. Home again. A video of 5 young people stoning a cat to death is so disturbing, police investigating the case say they were sickened by it. The group, all aged under 16, were tracked down by police in Southland this afternoon after an animal welfare group complained. Nita Blake-Person has been looking into the case.
The short video shows a teenager holding a tiny black kitten before dropping it on the concrete and then throwing a rock at it. From the sidelines, other children urge her to kill the kitten. The scene is so disturbing, the animal welfare group Poor Justice posted the video on its Facebook page so they could track down the young people. Craig Dunn, the group's co-founder, says it was a tough decision to share the video, but they wanted to highlight the abuse.
It's one of the worst things I've ever seen, and I want to show people and go, look, people need to see what's really going on in New Zealand. You know, for the good dog owners and the pet owners that are out there in the community who love their animals, they don't actually see the bad side of what we actually see, and to show that this actually goes on in New Zealand is kind of a wake-up call.
SPCA Southland manager Richard Hayes says welfare officers supported police and later confiscated 3 other kittens from one of the teenagers' homes.
I've gone through it frame by frame personally. Yeah. It certainly is extremely distraughting, probably one of the worst cases that we have come across in Southland.
Mr Hayes says pets are a very emotive issue, and he's not surprised the video has been viewed more than 200,000 times.
Most of the content is from people that are saying that they will not look at it, but they know what it's about and then want to voice their opinion. But having said that, it also does help sometimes to get any leads or to get the word out there, people that know people that know people, and eventually it all shakes out.
There are thousands of comments on the post abusing and threatening the teenagers. Some of those comments included the name and the address of the teenager who is alleged to have thrown the rock. NetSafe Chief Executive Martin Cocker says while it was horrific offending, it wasn't up to animal welfare groups to identify offenders, and they should have left it to police.
It is both concerning and entirely predictable. If you put up footage of somebody doing something like this, you know that it's going to incense other people online because you know how offensive the material is, and you know that some of those people are not necessarily going to hold back in terms of what they're going to say or potentially what actions they might take.
Constable Chris Wakelin is the sole charge officer in Ōhai and was able to easily identify the people involved in the video. He says the families of those involved didn't seem surprised to see him on their doorstep.
It became quite apparent to them once I explained what effect it had on the social media side of things and how people had viewed it, and me as well. I'm a human being, and nobody likes to see these kind of things, especially to defenceless animals. It was explained to them the impact it's had on the community and the country as a whole. They were quite upset.
5 people aged between 11 and 16 years old have been referred to Invercargill Youth Services over the incident. Constable Wakelin says he'd like to see those responsible go before the youth court. Motu Hōtaka o Te Ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake-Person aho.
Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint. It is exactly 27 minutes to 6. Coming up, the Minister for Children's Office confirms Kids Can did try to seek an interview with the Minister before she spoke to Checkpoint. Checkpoint also understands the Kickstart Breakfast in Schools program is also under review. There's outrage in Waitara, where the owners of properties on leasehold land say new lease payments of more than 1,000% will cause financial hardship and force people from their homes. We're getting a lot of feedback tonight, and we really appreciate it. Do feel free to join in. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, where you can also watch us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Business next, but first Katrina Batten with the headlines.
In a surprise result widely seen as a blow to the Trump administration, Democrat Doug Jones has won Alabama's election for the United States Senate. His Republican rival Roy Moore's campaign has been dogged by allegations of sexual misconduct towards teenagers in the 1980s. The ACT MP, David Seymour, will change his bill on legalising euthanasia in order to get New Zealand First support for it. It will now include the requirement of a public referendum before any changes become law. 5 young people have been referred to Invercargill Youth Aid over the abuse and killing of a kitten, which was shared on social media. The eldest was 16 and the youngest 11. The new government's shake-up of the Ministry for Primary Industries has been described as ludicrous and wasteful by the former Minister Nathan Guy. 4 new entities, Fisheries New Zealand, Forestry New Zealand, Biosecurity New Zealand and New Zealand Food Safety, are to be created by April. The cost of upgrading 2 of the Navy's frigates has blown out again, this time by $140 million. The project will now cost $639 million. The Defence Minister, Ron Mark, says the government decided against finding a new company to complete the upgrade and has revised its contract with Lockheed Martin Canada. The State Services Minister says some chief executives' pay increases cannot be justified when compared to what other New Zealanders get. The boards of 3 Crown entities, ACC, TELARC and the Super Fund, have been told they've paid their CEOs too much and warned not to ignore future recommendations. The Prime Minister says Australia is being overly sensitive about New Zealand's offer to take Manus Island refugees. In an interview on News Talk ZB yesterday, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce suggested New Zealand mind its own business regarding this issue. Jacinda Ardern says she's not made any new comments and it's Australia that keeps bringing the matter up. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much, which is not that far away, about 24 minutes away. Katrina, let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, who beams in from our Wellington office where there was birthday cake today. It wasn't your birthday, was it, Jono?
It was indeed, John.
Happy birthday, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you, John. Appreciate that.
The cake
28.
20, you are 28.
The number. 28, yeah.
Well, young man. Right, housing market activity picks up. Tell us about it.
We've had the Real Estate Institute numbers out today, John, for the month of November. Shows a big rise in the volume of sales during the month. That national median also picked up to around $540,000. Getting some record prices, though, in various regions, places like Manawatu, Hawke's Bay. The market has been a bit muted leading up to the general election and people uncertain about the policies of the new government, as well as those loan-to-value restrictions. That usual spring surge as a result has been a bit delayed. But if we look at the market itself, it's still strong. Prices are rising, even though the rate of growth has been easing. The LVRs are being eased from next year, but only modestly, so they're still in place. Banks are still being a bit careful with where they put their lending. So all those things are going on, which leads to quite a strong market still. For now, though, we've got Christmas and the holidays coming up. The market usually dies down a bit over then. So it's really January, February before we get another steer on how the property market is going.
Jono, an economic report on the potential benefits of the next America's Cup. This is it tea leaf reading or is it does it read rigorously and well?
Possibly a bit of both, John. This is you're throwing forward to the 2021 event. This report's been done by the commercial real estate firm CBRE. It's crunched the numbers, guessing that the contribution to the retail sector will be as much as $250 million over that temporary 3-month period. So big number. If we throw back to 2003, the contribution was about $136 million. So a big rise, talking big numbers, a big boost in visitor numbers as well, and pressure on infrastructure.
What happened on the markets today, Jonathan?
Yeah, another record, another modest gain on the market to 8,285. A Kiwi dollar trading at 69.5 US cents and just under 92 Australian. John.
Birthday boy, Jonathan Mitchell. Have a wonderful night, Jono. Jonathan Mitchell, our business reporter, joining us from Wellington. Now, last night, Julie Chapman, the CEO of children's charity KidsCan, revealed she'd been advised by Oranga Tamariki, the ministry, that $350,000 in government funding would cease from July 1st next year. KidsCan, which has been in operation for 12 years, provides food, clothing and healthcare to 168,000 children across 700 New Zealand schools. The ministry told us KidsCan's funding had been time limited and would end on the 30th of June 2018. It said no final decisions had been made yet about future funding. Now, the Minister for Children, Tracy Martin, declined to be interviewed tonight, but she did speak to Guy and Espiner this morning on Morning Report and expressed concern that Ms Chapman had come to us, Checkpoint, before going to the ministry itself.
We have a strong relationship there. I would have preferred Julie to talk to me rather than to go to John Campbell.
Well, the kind of mystery is here, though. I mean, you're saying that there have been no decisions, but why would, obviously, a very successful and intelligent and high-powered executive who runs something like this, I mean, she's obviously done pretty well. Why would she go public with the idea that her funding was going to end, and why would someone from your ministry tell her that if it wasn't true?
Well, listen, the funding was time limited.
So that's Tracy Martin speaking on Morning Report this morning, of course. Julie Chapman from KidsCan disputes her funding was time limited. She says that $350,000 was put into baseline funding, which means it should roll over annually. Now, Checkpoint can tonight reveal that since that interview this morning, Minister Tracy Martin's office has confirmed to us that Julie Chapman of KidsCan did in fact come to the Minister requesting a meeting 10 days after Ms Martin took over the portfolio of Children's Minister. When asked how Minister Martin responded to that request, we were told a meeting with the charity was not a priority. The charity was told a meeting was declined. Checkpoint also understands the Kickstart Breakfast in Schools program is under review as well. The national government invested $9.5 million over 5 years from 2012, expanding the breakfast program from decile 1 to 4 schools to any schools who needed it. Funding for that program officially ends on June 30 next year too. We asked Oranga Tamariki for an interview today, but they declined. Fonterra told us while it had not received official notification from Oranga Tamariki, its partnership with the government does end next year. It says it hopes to have discussions before the breakfast program ends. It's coming up to 90 minutes to 6. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Australia's being overly sensitive over New Zealand's position on Manus Island. Ms Ardern's restated a 2013 offer from the previous national government to take 150 refugees from Australia's offshore detention centres. The offer has so far been turned down by Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, and others. Obviously, Barnaby Joyce stirred up tension again yesterday, effectively warning Ms Ardern to mind her own business and sounding slightly aggrieved about it all. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
So much for that special Trans-Tasman bond. The refugee crisis on Manus Island continues to put strain on the two countries' relationship.
And Mr Joyce, the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, is with me. And Mr Joyce, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Larry.
Australia's Deputy PM, Barnaby Joyce, on News Talk ZB last night, asked whether New Zealand should back off. He didn't mince his words.
It's best if you stay away from another country's business. Otherwise, they'll return the favour at the time they think is most opportune to them.
Jacinda Ardern was never mentioned by name, but there's no question she was the intended target.
And if you're going to talk to them at all, talk to them quietly and discreetly off the record, not via telephone, not via TV.
Ms Ardern's at a loss, saying she hasn't raised the issue for weeks and is only talking about it because Australian politicians keep bringing it up.
As far as I'm concerned, we made the offer, it remains on the table, that's that.
But that's not that.
Do you think the Australians are being overly sensitive?
Yes.
The ongoing lecturing of Australia about Manus Island for domestic purposes is creating tension in the relationship, and that'll make it hard to achieve other things that New Zealand wants to achieve.
Nationals leader Bill English says Labour's campaign has gone too far.
When I'm sure the Prime Minister knows the Australians are not going to respond to that kind of lecturing.
But Ms Ardern insists relations are just fine and that her bond with her counterpart Malcolm Turnbull isn't breaking down.
No, not at all. In fact, I've had contact with Prime Minister Turnbull since then on other matters. Not at all. We continue to have a good working relationship.
Perhaps less so with Barnaby Joyce. You might remember he was temporarily ejected from Australia's Parliament a few months back after it was revealed he had Kiwi citizenship. He's since been nominated for New Zealander of the Year. One can only hope that accolade might mend the Trans-Tasman rift.
Thank you for coming on the program. I appreciate it.
Good on you, mate.
Atu i te whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Craig McCulloch ho.
Good on you, mate. The United States may be softening its stance on holding talks with North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. In a significant speech, the US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has offered to hold direct talks with North Korea's leadership, although he's reiterated the US cannot accept a nuclear-armed North Korea. But given Mr Tillerson's strained relations with President Donald Trump, it remains to be seen if the comments represent a change of policy. The ABC's Ann Barker is in Washington.
Rex Tillerson's comments to the Atlantic Council think tank in Washington come just 2 weeks after renewed tensions over North Korea's latest missile test that showed just how capable Pyongyang potentially is of striking the US eastern seaboard. Yet despite that, the US Secretary of State is now offering to sit down with North Korea's leadership without any preconditions.
We're ready to talk anytime North Korea would like to talk. And we're ready to have the first meeting without precondition. Let's just meet. We can talk about the weather if you want. We can talk about whether it's going to be a square table or a round table if that's what you're excited about. But can we at least sit down and see each other face to face?
Rex Tillerson's comments appear to back away from previous demands that Pyongyang must first accept that any such negotiations would have to be based on its agreement to nuclear disarmament, though he does maintain that North Korea would need to hold off on weapons testing for the talks to go ahead.
It's not realistic to say we're only going to talk if you come to the table ready to give up your program. They have too much invested in it. And the president's very realistic about that as well. And so it's really about how do you even begin the process of engagement, because we're dealing with a new leader in North Korea that no one's ever engaged with.
One North Korea expert, Dr. Ewan Graham, director of the International Security Program at Australia's Lowy Institute, says Rex Tillerson's comments represent a significant change in stance.
Up until now, the US has not closed the door on talks, but has always linked that to a commitment towards denuclearization on the North Koreans' part. Now, if that's been dropped, that's quite a significant change. There are different ways to read North Korean behaviour at the moment, but I think it is significant that the North Koreans have held just one significant ICBM test in recent months. To me, that suggests they haven't given up on their goal of a fully deployed long-range nuclear missile capability, but they're not scrambling for the finishing line now. They're tiptoeing over the edge.
Donald Trump has previously warned Rex Tillerson would be wasting his time if he tried to pursue direct channels of communication with Pyongyang. And given the strength of reports that the president is preparing to sack his Secretary of State early next year, since relations between the two men became strained, it's hard to know whether Donald Trump himself supports this new offer.
And Barker reporting there won't be too many current affairs or news programs in the world doing this tonight, going from Pyongyang to Waitara, but that's what we are doing. Owners of properties on leasehold land in Waitara say new lease payments are causing financial hardship and people fear being forced out of their homes. Leases in the Taranaki town have gone from an average of $400 annually to about $4,700, an increase of more than 1,000%. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
The Waitara leases are a legacy of the Taranaki Wars of the late 1800s, when vast tracts of land were illegally confiscated from Māori. There are about 780 properties in the town on 21-year leases. They are the subject of the Waitara Lands Bill, which seeks to allow the freeholding of the properties and is currently making its way through Parliament. English expat Lee Matthews says he recently got a letter from the New Plymouth Council telling him his lease was about to go up.
It basically went from $397 a year to $4,980, and that takes effect the 21st of January, so, you know, just after Christmas. Nice. Yeah, it's a bit of a shock to say the least, so it basically goes from $8 a week to about $96.
A truck driver, Mr Matthews says the hike is going to cause considerable pain.
So to go from $8 a week to that is quite significant, considering we've got 2 children, 2 foster children, and we've got a baby due in February.
Retiree Jean, who lives in the flight path to New Plymouth Airport, is now $7,000 in arrears after her lease increased to $4,725 in 2014. She fears losing her home of 17 years after the council recently warned of its right to cancel her lease if she did not make arrangements to pay off the arrears.
This is our home. We might not own the land, but this is our home. And they are not going to take it off us. This is what we worked for. This is our home. And I don't know how many times I have told people it's our home.
Jean says she and her husband are struggling to pay, even at a reduced rate.
We're on fixed money. Each dollar is allotted, but any pensioner will tell you that. And at the moment, if we paid the full lease, it would be costing us $95 a week. And it's too much. We just haven't got it.
Jean says they were told they would be able to freehold, but it never happened, and now it's too late for them. Josephine Moore is a member of Te Atiawa. She has refused to sign her new lease, which jumped from about $400 to more than $5,000.
We believe that the land is part of the stolen land confiscated off Te Atiawa, and we believe that that issue needs to be addressed, and that the council are administrators of the lease, but they're not the legal owners of the land.
Ms Moore says the council has no place negotiating new leases when the ownership of the land is up in the air. The New Plymouth Council declined an interview. In a statement, it says the new leases are based on an independent assessment of the unimproved land value. It notes average rateable land values in Waitara increased from $5,000 in 1995 to $110,000 in 2016. The council says it works with leaseholders who struggle to make payments, but that more than 95% are paid without incident. It was unable to say how many leases have been terminated in recent times. If it comes to that, council officers will not be welcome at Jean's place.
Well, I'll be very blunt, so try and come in here. That's simple. Because they're not taking what we've worked hard for. And we've worked hard, and they're not taking it.
A meeting of Waitara leaseholders is planned for tomorrow night to discuss the lease hikes and their legal options. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Robin Martin ahau.
Well, it's a busy old night on Checkpoint tonight. Lots of things unfolding, and one of them is a statement from Oranga Tamariki, Deputy Chief Executive, Partnering for Outcomes, Celia Patrick. This is about the Kickstart program. We've been talking about this. In fact, we were talking about it earlier in the program. The funding for the Kickstart program, which is supported by Sanitarium and Fonterra, is currently scheduled to end at the end of this financial year. They have received, Celia Patrick tells us, $1.1 million per annum to expand their existing program to reach just over 900 schools. No decisions have yet been made about future funding. Funding decisions for specific programs are part of Budget 2018. Kickstart and KidsCan are the only partnerships of this nature that we have that conclude at the end of this financial year. So, let's reiterate. Kickstart is the Sanitarium and Fonterra breakfast in schools, effectively. It's Wheat Bix and milk. It was started by Sanitarium and Fonterra and then boosted by the government. The boosting ends at the end of June of next year, and it is being reviewed. So too KidsCan, which was receiving $350,000. KidsCan regarded as baseline funding, but that too is being reviewed. KidsCan say they were told by Oranga Tamariki that it wasn't being continued. Some confusion around that. The Minister said that it is not that definitive. We'll keep looking at this. The government, of course, the government's making a major announcement about how they will target child poverty, and we will look at that at length when it is made. A lot of feedback tonight on our lead story about immigration and the Indian students who have been deported, but in at least 2 cases fathered New Zealand children, had New Zealand children while they were here. I feel sympathy for the couple who were being parted because of breaking immigration rules. However, I also met a New Zealander while on holiday in 1983. I knew the rules. We went to immigration for a short extension of my holiday visa to get married, which was granted with a date to leave, and returned to the UK to sort my things there. The day after that exit date, immigration rang my then husband, and he explained I'd left as instructed. I was expected to apply for permission to return to New Zealand using our marriage in London. I did this, and it took some months to return, but was a straightforward business-like process. As it turned out, I had left pregnant, and I've been with my husband since, and we have 3 grown-up children. Perhaps this couple had one obvious choice. Given the young man had broken the rules here, perhaps they can live together in his country with their child and return here after the 5 years has passed. It is possible that he, as he was a student, which would cost money, his parents in a position to support him and his wife, and they will have the enrichment of living in another country. The bottom line is that people do cheat the system, and given the amount of paperwork and questions to even get a holiday visa for India, this young man should have been more careful. But it needn't be the end for them if they truly love each other. Lots of feedback coming in on both sides of this issue. We will return to it. Thank you. We really appreciate hearing from you. You can text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The school bell has nearly rung on the year. Well, older kids have well and truly finished. And for thousands of primary school children, that means 6 weeks of freedom and No reading, unless they want to. Reading is a good thing if you're listening to children. Writing or maths to be done. But not all teachers and parents are rejoicing, because students can often lose a year or more of their academic progress in writing during the summer holiday, and it can take months to recover the following year. 2 steps forward, 1 step back over the summer holidays. But a new blogging program that's being trialled in low decile schools in Auckland is being hailed as an innovative way to beat the so-called summer slump. Anusha Bradley went back to school to find out more.
It's assembly time at Panmure Bridge School, a Decile 1 primary in East Auckland. And today there's something to celebrate. The blogging initiative that these pupils and those from 5 other schools have taken part in over the last 2 summers has been so successful, it's being expanded to 52 schools across the country. The Summer Learning Journey program is the brainchild of Rachel Williams from Auckland University's Wolf Fisher Research Centre. She says the summer slump is a phenomenon that's seen around the world.
Students leave school at the end of one school year, and then they experience a really dramatic slide or slump in their literacy learning, so their reading and their writing learning over summer. So when they return to school in term 1 of the next year, their reading and writing scores are dramatically lower than they were when they left. And so we're looking at ways to address that here in New Zealand.
And it appears that blogging may be the answer.
What we found is just 10 to 15 minutes of blogging a day led to really dramatic gains in the students' writing scores. So here we use standardized tests, typically an EASTL assessment, and when we looked at their average writing scores after summer, students who blogged had actually maintained their writing achievement, and this was the first time in their academic careers that they had ever done that.
Panmure Bridge Principal Richard Johnston says the program has made a dramatic difference to the lives of many kids at his school.
Many of our families don't have the opportunities to go on lots of outings, and this means that children have something sensible to do in the holidays, but it's also fun. And a lot of our students miss their peers over the holiday period. With the power of technology, they can keep communicating with them and sharing their learning. So that's a very powerful outcome. Probably the greatest thing we see is that when they come back to school at the end of 6 weeks, that they haven't regressed in their learning or what they know, and they come back prepared to learn. They're in that mode of learning, and that gives them a really good head start. And it means that we're not sort of going back and covering ground that we lost out before we left for Christmas.
The program has a different theme each year, and students are set different tasks to complete. Bloggers from around the world are recruited to read their work and send feedback. 12-year-old Daniel Grady, who's taken part in the program for the last 2 summers, says it's a way to learn about different parts of the country and even the world.
My favourite one so far has been the one where we had to learn about what our chosen country eats. So I was learning about Canada, and I found out they like pancakes with maple syrup.
10-year-old Mele Latuila is another experienced student blogger.
My favourite task was trying to compare like what food my culture eats compared to what kind of food New Zealand eats.
And what did you find?
I found that New Zealand normally eats like all those normal things like Whitbix for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, but in Tongan for dinner we have pork and or vegetables and that.
Funding from the Next Foundation and the MSA Charitable Trust means 1,400 children will take part in the Summer Learning Journey program this summer, ensuring that while the summer break is just around the corner, the brains of these bloggers will definitely not lapse into holiday mode. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
2 minutes before 6, lots of feedback coming in on immigration. By and large, people are saying Immigration New Zealand got it right. Hi, John. I'm a 28-year-old New Zealand citizen. My husband is a Nepali national who I met while living long-term in Nepal rather than on holidays, many assume. We've been to hell and back with Immigration New Zealand because of the judgments made on him because of his nationality. However, we've always tried our best to be sincere, open and lawful. It makes my blood boil when I hear of cases of people complaining they haven't got a visa when they'd broken the law. It's people who overstay or try to deceive immigration who place suspicion on those of us trying genuinely to be together in a lawful way. With the help of an excellent lawyer, we are now happily living together in New Zealand, but I will never forget the years we spent apart because of declined visas and distrust of our relationship being genuine. But never once did we use the media as a way to reunite, and it makes me think when a lot of the cases coming to the media are those that have broken the rules. Thank you. This from Eddie in Christchurch. I do believe New Zealand is right to exclude residency on the basis that a person was in New Zealand illegally in the first place. The person may not have become a father had they not overstayed illegally. Whilst the issue of being Indian was also discussed, it would have been good, I guess, to recognise that corruption in India is incredibly high and almost part of Indian culture, says Eddie from Christchurch. Thank you for your feedback. Lots of it tonight. Not all of it from that side of the coin. John, refamilies being split by immigration decisions. Mercy, spelt in block letters, a 5-letter word that in New Zealand we seem to be in danger of forgetting, says Leanne from Wadestown. And Grant says we're getting as bad as the Aussie immigration system. Thank you all for your feedback. Colin is saying Alabama, wonderful one for sanity. In fact, a lot of people in rejoicing at Alabama going to the Democrats. Quite an extraordinary state of affairs. First time in 25 years that state hasn't voted Republican. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. It's rock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A coroner has found the death of Moko Rangi Tohereri could have been avoided had recommendations from Nia Glassey's inquest been followed. The 3-year-old died in Taupo in 2015 after being violently abused by the 2 people supposed to be caring for him. Edward Gay reports.
In the findings released this evening, Coroner Wallace Bain reiterates the recommendations he made following Nia Glassey's death in 2007. He says the most important primary recommendation is that all children from birth need to be registered with government agencies. He acknowledges that while many other recommendations from Nia Glassey's inquest were followed, the idea of a compulsory register was not. Dr Bain says too many opportunities to help Moko were missed by several agencies in the months leading up to his death. Ko Edward Gay aho.
It's emerged that 5 young people, the eldest 16 and the youngest 11, were involved in the abuse and killing of a kitten in Southland. A video showing the kitten being bashed to death with a stone has caused widespread outrage. Constable Chris Wakeland says the 5 are being interviewed and referred to Invercargill's Youth Aid.
Personally, I'm quite disgusted in this video, and I'm sure anybody who's seen it is. I just want everyone to know that I'm doing everything I can to get these people before the courts and to face their responsibilities, and hopefully we won't see anything like this again, certainly not in my community or throughout New Zealand.
Chris Wakeland says the SPCA has removed 3 other kittens from the home of one of the offenders. In a US Senate contest seen as a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency, the Democratic candidate Doug Jones has scored an upset win over the Republican Roy Moore in Alabama. Mr. Moore's campaign has been dogged by allegations of sexual misconduct towards teenagers in the 1980s. The BBC's Gary O'Donoghue reports from Alabama.
This will send enormous shockwaves through not just Alabama, but through Washington and the rest of the country. And it does now mean, of course, that Donald Trump has the slimmest possible of margins in the United States Senate. He's down to 51 versus 49. That means that his tax reform bill, his tax cuts, future plans to reform health care, anything he wants to do on infrastructure, all this stuff becomes much, much harder than it is at the moment. This is a political upset of massive proportions.
Gary O'Donoghue. Mr. Jones is the first Democrat elected to the Senate from Alabama in a quarter century. The ACT MP, David Seymour, will change his bill on legalising euthanasia in order to get the support of New Zealand's first 9 MPs for it. It will now include the requirement of a public referendum before any changes become law. Mr. Seymour thinks a referendum could take some heat out of the issue.
A lot of members of Parliament are feeling a lot of pressure, and if they knew the final tick-off would be by the people of New Zealand, maybe that would reduce the pressure. But I can also tell you that with 75% of New Zealanders consistently saying they support choice, we would win a referendum.
David Seymour's bill could possibly come before Parliament tonight, and if not, it will be debated early next year. A Bay of Plenty woman is begging immigration officials to allow her Indian partner back into the country to live with her and their child. Nikki Harawira says she knew Palwit Jinder Singh was an overstayer but thought if they could prove their relationship was genuine, he'd be allowed to stay. Officials recommended accepting his application under the family partnership category, but a tearful Ms Harawira told Checkpoint that's been rejected without explanation.
Absolutely broke my heart, and but we just, what can we do? We're not going to give up. And
Nikki Harawira's lawyer, Alistair McClymont, says immigration is taking an increasingly punitive attitude towards overstayers with New Zealand-born children, and he has dozens of cases similar to hers. The Chief Ombudsman says the Horowhenua District Council's email blocking policy has revealed seriously concerning practices. However, Peter Bosher has stopped short of a systemic review. Emile Donovan reports.
In July, an internal audit of the council found the emails of people or organisations on a blacklist were being diverted to the Chief Executive, David Clapperton, for screening. At the time, Mr Clapperton said the policy was necessary to protect staff from abusive messages. The policy's since been changed, but Judge Bosher says that's not the end of the matter. He says investigators will look into 4 complaints about intercepted emails, and he himself will be overseeing the effectiveness of the new policy. Judge Bosher says wider local government issues are involved, and he wants them monitored better. This is Emile Donovan.
It's 6:05. Sport, and the All Blacks captain Kieran Reid is likely to miss the start of next year's Super Rugby competition as he recovers from surgery. Reid sat out the All Blacks' final game of the season against Wales last month because of the back injury. The 32-year-old confirmed on social media he'll have surgery this Saturday and will likely miss the start of the Super Rugby season. The Crusaders' first game is against the Chiefs in late February. Meanwhile, Australia have launched bids to host the Men's Rugby World Cup in 2027 and the Women's event in 2021. Australia last hosted the men's tournament in 2003, but have never hosted the women's. The New Zealand Black Ferns won the last one in Ireland earlier this year. The Black Caps coach Mike Hesson has reiterated his confidence in all-rounder Mitchell Santner after a quiet Test series against the West Indies. Santner scored just 67 runs and took 3 wickets during the 2 Test series win, but Hesson says the 25-year-old remains a key part of the lineup and will feature in the Test series against England in March.
He's progressing nicely in terms of, still averages close to 30 the last 6-7 tests. Been part of 3 very important partnerships in this series, 40, 50 and 70 in the 3 bats he's had. And that actually allows the guys like Colin and Tom to actually play freely. So it's a really important job that he does in that role.
Black Caps coach Mike Hesson. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, Simon Morris looks back on a year at being at the movies. Yep, it's that time again. This week's overseas correspondent, Tabu Butagira, is on the line from Kampala, Uganda, where their pre-Christmas rush makes ours look like a stroll in the park. And if that's little consolation, we've got the singer-songwriter Neil McLeod in the studio with a laid-back acoustic set. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Waikato mainly fine but isolated showers today and rain tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupō mainly fine, isolated showers in the afternoons and evenings. Waitomo to Wellington including Taihape, isolated showers turning to rain this evening, then clearing early tomorrow morning. Isolated thunderstorms possible from Taranaki to Wellington. Hawke's Bay, Gisborne and Wairarapa, isolated showers turning to rain tonight with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms and hail. Rain easing to showers later tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, isolated showers turning to rain this afternoon, possibly heavy with thunderstorms and hail clearing tonight. Canterbury, rain, possibly heavy with thunderstorms and hail inland, easing to showers overnight, then clearing tomorrow. For the remainder of the South Island, scattered rain, clearing for Fiordland and Southland this afternoon and elsewhere this evening. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers from this evening. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Lots of breaking news tonight and unfolding news. Moko rangitohiriri. Obviously, the very big and important report from the coroner is out, and we will have a long examination of that from Edward Gay in a moment. But the other big story of this evening was that result in Alabama. Democrat Doug Jones has won Alabama's election for the US Senate, scoring an upset victory in a deeply conservative Republican state against a Republican candidate who was strongly and repeatedly backed by President Donald Trump. The results are an embarrassment for the president and a disaster for Republicans in Washington, with their narrow Senate majority now trimmed to just 2 votes. The BBC's Nick Bryant has been in Alabama and had this report on a bizarre campaign in a state which would normally have been a slam dunk for the Republicans.
Just when you thought American politics couldn't get any weirder, Judge Roy Moore rides to the polling station on horseback and then sets it to music. He's come to personify the polarization of this manic political age. To his female accusers, he's a sexual predator who molested teenage girls in his 30s. To his fans, he's a crusading evangelical, a firebrand populist in the mold of Donald Trump.
I want to make America great again with President Trump. I want America great, but I want America good, and she can't be good until we go back to God.
Moore fiercely denies the allegations of sexual misconduct, and his supporters have adopted the new default position of the politically embattled. They're crying fake news.
All of a sudden, here come the allegations, blah, 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 from 40 years ago. That makes it highly, highly, highly suspect in my mind.
Oh, that's nothing but a bunch of fake news.
Things that happened so long ago. There's such a thing as redemption.
Though many senior Republicans have refused to back Roy Moore, he has a cheerleader in Donald Trump. For the president, it's morally uncomplicated. To advance his legislative agenda, he needs a Republican in the Senate.
So get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Do it.
And I mean, I literally broke down in tears over all of this.
These Republicans can't bring themselves to vote for Roy Moore. They've defected to the Democrat, Doug Jones.
It's because I'm Republican. It's because I'm a Christian. It's because the party that I belong to does not support people like Roy Moore.
Alabama was a great battleground of the civil rights era. This, too, is a climactic, defining struggle. This has become so much more than a Senate race. It's a battle for the soul of the Republican Party between the establishment and more radical populist forces. It's a test of whether any allegation is disqualifying in modern-day public life here. And it's an indication of the extent to which Donald Trump has changed America's political culture.
Nick Bryant from the BBC. That was effectively a preview. You would have heard Donald Trump say, get out and vote for Roy Moore. Well, they did, but more people voted for Doug Jones. 96% of African-American voters, 96%, a huge turnout in that community, supported Doug Jones. Lots of people pointing out, of course, that Doug Jones had a pretty tremendous track record in the civil rights movement, supporting African Americans in Alabama, but overwhelmingly this is a repudiation of Donald Trump's potency for galvanizing white conservative voters in all circumstances. In short, Roy Moore was just a bridge too far for them in Alabama. Absolutely fascinating. It's 12 minutes past 6. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. 3-year-old Moko rangitohiriri was subject to a prolonged and painful death by the very people who were meant to care for him. But a coroner has concluded that Oranga Tamariki's predecessor, Child, Youth and Family, a DHB and 3 community organisations were blind to the warning signs and failed to ask key questions in the weeks before. Wallace Bain cited an example. On July 30, 2015, Oranga Tamariki filed a report of concern that had urgent status, and that meant Moko and his sister should have been visited within the week. That never happened, and 10 days later, Moko was dead. This is a major piece of work by the coroner. Our court reporter Edward Gay has just filed this report on it.
Nicola Daly-Paki put her son Moko and his sister in the care of friend Tanya Shayla in Taupo while she travelled up to Auckland to be with another of her children who was in Starship Hospital. Over the next 2 months, Moko was kicked, slapped, bitten, thrown and stomped on. When he began soiling himself, he had faeces rubbed in his face as punishment and died of a ruptured bowel and head injury. Coroner Wallace Bain, who also conducted the inquest into murdered Rotorua toddler Nia Glasi, said Shayla and her partner David Hairewa subjected Moko to a joint campaign of violence that defies belief. But Dr. Bain said a number of red flags were present. That's backed up by lawyer Aramangapō Lipscomb, who represented Miss Daly-Paki at the inquest.
There were policies in place that were ignored by the professionals working in the organisation.
Concerns from the local kindergarten weren't followed up on. Shayla's depression and mental health was escalating and she cancelled an appointment with a psychiatrist. Dr. Bain said that was another red flag. Family Start social workers visited the home 10 days before Moko's death but didn't see the 3-year-old because they were told he was having time out in the bedroom. Māori Women's Refuge and Oranga Tamariki were also providing services, but had no idea David Hairewa was living in the house. He had a history of family violence. Moko's grandmother also raised concerns with Oranga Tamariki, but she was ignored. The coroner found Moko could have been saved had he been seen by medical staff hours before his death. The Children's Commissioner, Andrew Beecroft, summed it up when he told the coroner there were sufficient eyes and ears on Moko's circumstances and care at various stages, yet their eyes did not properly see and their ears did not clearly hear. The various organisations, including Oranga Tamariki, failed to trigger any real or proper investigation into Moko's well-being. Oranga Tamariki's Deputy Chief Executive for Services for Children is Glenys Sandland.
Oranga Tamariki has driven a number of changes since the tragic deaths of both Nia and Moko, and we're sharing information and working alongside iwi and Māori in ways that haven't happened before, and one of our key areas of focus is linking with other government and community organisations to improve our services.
Asked if the changes made would ensure a tragedy like Moko's death would not happen again, Ms Sandland did not respond directly to the question.
Oranga Tamariki has driven a number of changes, and we continue to look for ways that we can improve our practice and meeting and families and working with children and families. It's about the voices of children, and we need to have the voices of children heard very loudly amongst Oranga Tamariki and other agencies and communities that we work with.
Ms Ngāpō Lipscomb says Moko's mother deserves an apology.
Yes, I believe that Nicola is entitled to an apology from the ministry for their failure to act on their own policies.
My colleague Joanna McKenzie, who also covered Moko's inquest, asked Ms Sandland whether Oranga Tamariki should say sorry.
And would this be a good opportunity to apologise to Moko's family?
I think that the sympathy that we feel for Moko and the family is heartfelt, and I don't. His death has affected everyone, and it must be a very difficult situation for the family, and we have to be better. Oranga Tamariki has driven a number of changes, and we need to get better every day.
Recommendations from the coroner include a compulsory register that would see all children monitored by a government agency. He also called for basic minimum standards for social workers working for community organisations. Judge Beecroft reiterated that.
It would be training in warning signs, what might be called red flags, and encouragement about how to and when to share information with other groups. So all those, I think, would be part of a core competency framework. It's there, it's ready to go, it's got to be finalised and rolled out fast.
He said it would be wrong to lay the blame solely at the feet of Oranga Tamariki.
And I think lurking behind it all is the fact that too many of our families are struggling in conditions of real material disadvantage and income-related poverty. Now, I'm not saying that is causative, because there are many, if not most, families in that situation who provide loving, stable homes and work their way through those tough times. But it is certainly and unarguably a risk factor.
As to the future, Judge Beecroft is positive. He says changes at Oranga Tamariki will take between 3 to 5 years to bed in, but the organisation is now child-focused.
We can't let the opportunity go. There's too much been invested in it, and our 1.2 million children deserve the absolute best. So that's what I say. I mean, we've got to grab this chance. That's why I say it is generational, once in a lifetime. And I guess shame on us if we get it wrong as adults. This is not an optional exercise. It's non-negotiable that we succeed.
He says it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Dr. Bain concludes his findings with New Zealand's shocking statistics. On average, a child is killed every 5 weeks, and most are under 5. 90% of them are killed by someone they know. The coroner said child abuse has to stop, whatever the cost, whatever it takes. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gayahau.
The ACT MP David Seymour will change his bill on legalising euthanasia to include the requirement for a public referendum. In return for that, he's getting New Zealand First support. Mr Seymour's end-of-life choice members' bill could come before Parliament as early as tonight. David Seymour joins me on the line now. Welcome back to Checkpoint. Is it coming before Parliament tonight?
Well, no one knows that for sure, John. Some of the people who are opposed to my bill have been suddenly discovering an enormous and detailed interest in bills that they don't know a huge amount about in order to try and forestall the debate of my bill. But I would say on balance it probably will. It probably will.
And do you have the numbers to get it through the first reading?
Yes, we do. Look, we believe that of the people we've spoken to, there's about 75 who are confirmed or likely to vote yes, and that leaves about 45 in the other camp.
So why do you say so? Forgive me, because it's a conscience vote, isn't it? But New Zealand First are being whipped, are they? You will get all of New Zealand's first vote, in return for a referendum. Is that right?
Well, in return for me supporting an amendment to the bill that would put the bill to referendum. So before it became a law, people would have to vote yes or no. Now, whether or not that actually happens will depend upon how other people in Parliament vote. So I've pledged my vote to their referendum amendment. They've got 9 votes. We need to find another 51 votes in Parliament to make sure that happens. Otherwise, the bill may go through and become a law without a referendum, or it may be defeated and not become a law. So obviously it's a bit technical, but the real issue here is that people have been waiting for 12 years since the last bill for New Zealanders who are very ill at the end of their life to have some choice.
So let's just talk about the numbers that you think you've got for the first reading. What do you think? You're fairly confident you're going to get it through comfortably, are you?
Look, I'm fairly confident. I mean, this is politics. Sometimes people say they're going to vote for something and then they don't. Sometimes they tell people different things. But look, based on what I've been working for the last year or so on my fellow MPs and quite intensively on the new ones who have been recently elected, and it appears that we've got a comfortable majority for the bill to pass. And I think the opponents know that because they've been, as I say, making these very long and detailed speeches on things they weren't interested in yesterday to try and delay progress in the House.
That is David Seymour. Thank you very much indeed. And once we hear whether or not it will be going through the House tonight, we will let you know, or Brian Crump will update you as the night goes on. 15 members of the Indian and Chinese communities met with government ministers this afternoon to demand action on crime. They're particularly concerned about violent robberies and assaults on dairy owners and small shopkeepers. The Crime Prevention Group's president, Sunny Kaushal, told our reporter Kate Pereira Garcia a short time ago about, well, some of what they were discussing.
See, the crime has been rising from some time and it is hurting the communities. And now this is to the point, this is enough is enough. So that's why we are here to the Parliament, and we had a meeting with the government ministers, and this was a constructive meeting today. And we were able to put an 8-point agenda and memorandum to the government, and they are aware of the issue. And this was a constructive meeting, and then we agreed to keep this dialogue on to find a solution for this trouble.
Tell me a bit more about those 8 points. What was in your memorandum? What are you asking for?
First of all, we are asking for toughening and reviewing the existing law so that we can bring the deterrent factor that include the harsher penalties. And we are asking about the police numbers to be increased and the resources for the police. There are police stations which are closed that need to be reopened. And also Winston Peters, he promised to set up a flying squad last year. So we reminded that one, and we're asking the flying squad to be set up so that we can deal with the situation. We spoke about the offenders, age review of the young offenders, and also bringing their parents accountable when the offenders are too young. And also the right to self-defense for the shop owners. Here we have requested the government to define the mode and manner of the self-defense. We are not talking about the gun culture, we're not talking about the weapon, but this need to be defined. And also we agreed on setting up a working group which would carry on the dialogue, and also the work for the dole. So we asked the government, those on unemployment benefit, they can be roped into this scheme, and they can be trained as security personnel, and they can constructively contribute to the society.
And how did the ministers meet those demands? What was their reaction?
They were very receptive, and they are aware of the problems, and they gave a good hearing to our points, and they agreed with our points, and we are looking forward to work with the government to get the solution urgently.
And where to from here? Have you got a timeline? Are you coming back to check on how things are going?
Yes, the next meetings would be held in Auckland, and again those concerned ministers would be involved, and our crime prevention would be contributing and working with the government on these issues.
So you're happy with how it's turned out?
Yes, we are very pleased with today's meeting, but there is a lot more to achieve, and we would like government to come forward, partnership with us, so that we can deliver the safer communities and businesses in New Zealand.
That's Sonny Koshal speaking to Kate Pereira Garcia outside Parliament earlier this afternoon. Earlier in the program, we were able to confirm that government funding for the Kickstart Breakfast in Schools program, which is also supported by Sanitarium Fonterra, comes to an end on June 30. That's the end of the financial year. This comes after Checkpoint revealed last night that the children's charity Kids Can also loses its government funding, $350,000 at the same time. Peter Jones is the principal of Manurewa High School, the largest Decile 1 secondary school in the country. A short time ago, our producer, Bridget Berg, asked him what percentage of the school uses the programs.
On a daily basis, between 10 and 20%. Obviously, time of year and weather plays a factor as well. But we'll have, on average, around 200 students attending our breakfast club. And then we make, on average, 500 toasted sandwiches a day. So we utilise the bread and the beans and the spaghetti that's provided and anything else, and we find that the best way the kids eat it is to make it into toasted sandwiches, and we supplement that as a school as well, so we're able to keep it running. So every day, and we've taken the stigma out of it as well, so the kids just come along, get a couple of toasted sandwiches. Then there's usually fruit and bars as well provided as well, so we just give that away.
What do you mean you've taken the stigma out of it?
So when we first started doing it, there was a bit of a stigma in the kids in coming up to get free food, if you like. Whereas now it's just become normalised in terms of we do it every day, we do it regularly, and there is no stigma now. All the kids come, and the kids are very good themselves in that they don't. If they're not hungry, if they don't feel that they need it, if they've got food from home or access to buy food, then they won't come and take. But there's no. I guess you'd have to see it to understand it. But the kids just come and utilise the food.
What difference would it make if that provision was removed?
I guess with funding we'd be struggling to replace that. We already subsidise at the moment to meet the need, and unless it's going to be replaced by a different type of provision, then that would be really hard for us to keep it going at the same levels.
It's Peter Jones, the principal of Manurewa High School, speaking to our producer Bridget Burke. Just a couple of minutes to go on Checkpoint tonight. What a busy old program it's been. Just before we go, we're going to return to our story from last night about troubles with the Royal New Zealand Ballet. At least 20 of the company's current dancers are either leaving or have not had their contracts renewed for next year. On Monday, the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, of course, confirmed she had asked for a briefing on the unfolding crisis, which receives $5.4 million for taxpayer funding the Royal New Zealand Ballet. Last night we spoke to former dancer Nathaniel Skelton, who told us the RNZB's troubles began well before the appointment of the latest artistic director, Patricia Barker. She's been much discussed, of course. Nathaniel Skelton told us the problems began with the prior director, Francesco Ventriglia, and the way he ran the company. The Royal New Zealand Ballet has refused multiple requests from Checkpoint to be interviewed about this and the issues raised by Mr. Skelton. We'd really love to talk to the RNZB, and we have tried very hard. Over the last 3 days, including today, Checkpoint has tried to call and email not only the ballet's communications director, obviously, but board members Candice Craven, Isaac Hikaka, and board chairman Stephen Fife. We even tried veteran dancer John Trimmer. Nobody would speak to us, and we have tried repeatedly and concertedly. The ballet did send us a statement at 12:31 a.m. That's this morning in response to our interview with Nathaniel last night. The statement says the RNZB is a responsible employer and the board of the RNZB takes and has always taken employees' concerns, particularly those alleging any kind of bullying, intimidation or abuse, extremely seriously. We have zero tolerance for behaviour of this kind. Should allegations be made, we have robust processes in place to investigate and resolve any issues. It's a matter of record that the Royal New Zealand Ballet experienced some workplace issues in the past. It says the board is committed to ensuring the RNZB is a supportive and safe workplace for all its artists and administrators, and that the company continues to grow and nurture New Zealand Ballet for New Zealand audiences. That statement arriving at 12:31 this morning. And that is Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us on behalf of our really excellent team. We appreciate your company, and we hope to enjoy it again tomorrow night from 5.